In the spring of 1986, inside a small North Carolina records office, a clerk opened a filing cabinet untouched for decades. Buried beneath yellowed papers and dust was a birth certificate that should not have existed. The name on it belonged to a child the Barrett family swore had never been born. But the hospital stamp was real. The doctor's signature was real. And the blood type listed didn't match a single living member of the Barrett line. For 3 generations, the Barretts had been held up as proof that racial purity could be maintained, documented, and defended in America. They were studied. They were photographed. Their family tree was published in medical journals. But that one piece of paper, hidden away for 40 years, unraveled everything. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just destroy a family. It exposed a system built to erase people like ghosts. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. This is the story of a bloodline that was never as pure as they claimed. This is the story of a child who was erased. And this is the story of what happens when a lie becomes law. The Barrett family of Asheville, North Carolina, wasn't just another old Southern family. They were a case study. In 1931, a team of eugenicists from the University of Virginia arrived at their sprawling estate with cameras, calipers, and notebooks. They measured skulls. They catalogued eye color. They traced the family tree back 7 generations, all the way to 1763. And when they were done, their findings were published in a journal called Heredity and National Character. The conclusion was simple. The Barretts were genetically pure. Anglo-Saxon, unmixed, a model for what America could be if the right people reproduced and the wrong people didn't. For the next 50 years, that designation followed them everywhere. The family was invited to speak at conferences. Their photographs appeared in textbooks. Local newspapers called them the first family of racial science. And the Barretts wore that label with pride. They displayed the framed journal article in their front hall like a war medal. Visitors were told the story before they even sat down for tea. This wasn't just heritage. It was proof. But there was a cost to being perfect. The family became obsessed with maintaining what they'd been told they had. Marriages were arranged with other certified families. Births were announced in the society pages, bloodline details included. And when something didn't fit, when a child was born with features that raised questions or a relative showed signs of what they called degeneration, that person disappeared from the record. Sometimes they were sent away. Sometimes they were institutionalized. And sometimes they were simply never mentioned again. By the 1980s, only 3 Barretts remained in Asheville. An elderly brother and sister, both unmarried, and a cousin who rarely spoke to anyone. The family had preserved itself into extinction, but the story they told never wavered. They were pure. They had the papers to prove it. And no one, not even the changing world around them, could take that away, until someone found the birth certificate that said otherwise. The clerk who found it wasn't looking for anything unusual. She was digitizing old records, a routine task mandated by the state to preserve documents crumbling with age. Most of what she scanned was mundane: births, deaths, property transfers. But then she opened a folder marked Confidential, 1946, and found a birth certificate that had been filed backwards, upside down, as if someone had shoved it in quickly, hoping no one would ever look. The child's name was listed as Baby Girl Barrett. No first name, just those 3 words. The mother's name was Rebecca Ann Barrett. The father's name was left blank. The birth date was March 14, 1946. The delivering physician was a doctor named Howard Milliken, who had practiced in Asheville for 30 years before retiring in 1952. Everything about the document seemed legitimate, except for one thing. According to the official Barrett family genealogy, the one published and republished in dozens of sources, Rebecca Ann Barrett had never given birth. She had never even been married. The clerk made a note and moved on, but something about it stayed with her. A week later, she pulled the certificate again and looked closer. The baby's blood type was listed as AB negative. Rare, very rare. She cross-referenced it with other Barrett family records on file, birth certificates, marriage licenses, death records. Not a single Barrett in 7 generations had AB negative blood. Not one. She brought it to her supervisor, who brought it to the county archivist, who brought it to a local historian named Dr. Ellen Marsh. Dr. Marsh had written extensively about Asheville's old families, and she knew the Barrett story well. She'd always found it strange how little was written about Rebecca and Barrett, despite her appearing in early family photos. In pictures from the 1930s, Rebecca was there, standing beside her brothers and sisters, smiling in a white dress. But by 1950, she was gone. No obituary, no marriage announcement, no mention of her at all. It was as if she'd been erased. Dr. Marsh requested access to hospital records from 1946. Most had been destroyed, but she found one ledger, a handwritten log kept by a night nurse that included a single entry. Barrett infant female transferred to state home. The state home was a facility for unwanted children. Most were adopted out, some were not, and once a child went in, the records were sealed permanently. Rebecca Ann Barrett was 23 years old when she disappeared from her family's life. In photographs from 1945, she looks composed, almost regal, standing in front of the Barrett estate, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her hair is pinned back. Her posture is perfect. She looks like someone who had been taught exactly how to stand, how to smile, how to exist in a way that reflected well on the family name. But by 1947, there were no more photographs of her, no letters, no records of where she went or why she left. The family simply stopped talking about her. Dr. Marsh began searching for anything that could explain what happened. She combed through old newspaper archives, church bulletins, society pages, anything that might mention Rebecca's name. What she found was strange. In 1944, Rebecca had been engaged to a man named Jonathan Pierce, the son of another prominent Asheville family. The engagement was announced in the paper with the usual fanfare, but 6 months later, the wedding was quietly called off. No explanation was given. Jonathan Pierce married someone else a year later. Rebecca was never engaged again. Then, in the spring of 1946, right around the time the birth certificate was dated, Rebecca's name appeared in the visitor log of a private sanatorium 2 hours outside Asheville. The facility was known for treating what they called nervous disorders, a polite term for anything families wanted hidden: women who drank too much, women who had breakdowns, women who got pregnant when they weren't supposed to. Rebecca's stay lasted 3 months. When she was discharged, the log noted she was released into the custody of her brother, William Barrett. After that, there was nothing. Dr. Marsh tracked down death records and found Rebecca's name in a registry from 1953. She had died in a state psychiatric hospital in the western part of North Carolina. Cause of death was listed as pneumonia, but the file noted she had been a resident there for 6 years. She was 30 years old. No family members were listed as next of kin. No one claimed her body. She was buried in an unmarked grave on the hospital grounds, a place where they put patients no one came back for. And in all the years that followed, not a single Barrett ever mentioned her name in public again. It was as if she had never existed at all. But the baby she gave birth to in March of 1946 was real. And that child's blood told a story the Barretts could never allow to be heard. AB negative blood is one of the rarest types in the world. Only about 1% of the population carries it. And it doesn't just appear randomly. It follows genetic rules that are absolute. For a child to have AB negative blood, both parents must carry specific alleles. One parent must contribute an A or B antigen, the other must contribute the opposite, and both must carry the recessive H-negative gene. It's not something that can be hidden or explained away. Blood doesn't lie. Dr. Marsh contacted a genetic genealogist named Samuel Roth, a man who specialized in tracing bloodlines through DNA and historical records. She gave him everything she had: the birth certificate, the Barrett family genealogy, the blood type. And she asked him one question. Is it possible for this child to have been a Barrett? He studied the records for 2 weeks. Then he called her back. His answer was simple. No. Not if the genealogy was accurate. Not if the family was as pure as they claimed. The only way that child could have AB negative blood was if the father wasn't who the Barretts said he was, or if Rebecca herself had a parent the family never acknowledged. Roth dug deeper. He requested archives from the eugenics study conducted in 1931. Most of the original research had been destroyed or locked away after World War II when eugenics fell out of favor in America. But he found a university library that still had copies of the unpublished field notes. And buried in those notes was something no one had ever talked about. During the initial study, one of the researchers had flagged an inconsistency. Rebecca's mother, a woman named Margaret Barrett, had a blood type that didn't quite align with the family's documented ancestry. The researcher noted it, then crossed it out. In the margin, someone had written in pencil, "Error in testing, disregard." But it wasn't an error. Margaret Barrett's maiden name was Sullivan. Irish Catholic, working class. She had married into the Barrett family in 1920, and by all appearances, she had been accepted without question. But the blood work suggested something different. Margaret's lineage likely included ancestry that wouldn't have been considered acceptable under the racial purity standards of the time. And if that was true, then Rebecca wasn't pure either. And neither was the baby she gave birth to in 1946. The entire foundation of the Barrett family's identity was a fabrication, and they had known it all along. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? The baby born in March of 1946 was never given a real name. On the birth certificate, she was simply Baby Girl Barrett. No first name, no identity, just a designation that marked her as something temporary, something that didn't need to be remembered. She was transferred to the state home for children 3 days after birth. Rebecca never held her, or if she did, there's no record of it. The child was admitted under a case number, not a name, and within 6 months, she was gone from the system entirely. Dr. Marsh tried to trace what happened next. Adoption records from that era were sealed by law and most facilities destroyed their files after 25 years. But she found a social worker who had worked at the state home in the 1970s, a woman named Dorothy Hayes, who still remembered the old filing system. Dorothy explained that children born to families like the Barretts, families with money and reputations to protect, were handled differently. They weren't put up for public adoption. They were placed privately, quietly, often with families far away who didn't ask questions. Sometimes the children were given new identities entirely. Birth certificates were amended, dates were changed, and the original records were buried so deep that even the children themselves would never know who they really were. Dorothy had kept a personal journal during her years at the state home. She wasn't supposed to, but she did it anyway because she couldn't stand the idea of these children disappearing without anyone remembering they existed. Dr. Marsh asked if she could look through it. Dorothy hesitated. Then she brought out a cardboard box filled with notebooks decades old, the pages yellowed and fragile. And there, in an entry from October of 1974, was a note about a woman who had come to the facility asking questions. The woman said she had been adopted in infancy. She had recently gained access to partial records that listed her place of birth as Asheville, North Carolina, and her birth year as 1946. She wanted to know if there was any way to find her biological mother. Dorothy had tried to help her. She searched what files still existed, but found nothing conclusive. The woman left her contact information just in case. Her name was listed as Margaret Delano. She was 28 years old, married, living in Georgia. She never came back. Dorothy assumed she had given up, moved on, accepted that some doors stay closed forever. But Dr. Marsh wrote down the name, and she decided to find out if Margaret Delano was still alive. Because if she was, then the story wasn't over. The erased child had grown up, and maybe, just maybe, she had children of her own, children who carried the same blood, the same truth, the same secret the Barretts tried to bury. Dr. Marsh found her in 2 days. Margaret Delano was still alive. She was 60 years old, living in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta, widowed with 2 grown children. Dr. Marsh sent a letter. She explained who she was, what she had found, and asked if Margaret would be willing to talk. 3 weeks passed with no response. Dr. Marsh assumed the letter had been ignored or thrown away. But then, on a Thursday afternoon in late August of 1986, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, but there was something underneath it, something that had been waiting a long time to be spoken. Margaret said she had always known she didn't belong to the family that raised her. She looked different. She felt different. And when she turned 18, she requested her adoption papers and found just enough information to know she had been born in Asheville to a woman whose name had been redacted. She tried to find more, but every door was locked. Every record was sealed. She eventually stopped searching because it hurt too much to keep running into walls, but she never stopped wondering. And now, after 40 years, someone was telling her the truth. Dr. Marsh told her everything, about Rebecca, about the Barrett family, about the blood type that didn't match, and the eugenics study that had been built on a lie. Margaret listened without interrupting. When Dr. Marsh finished, there was a long silence. Then Margaret said something that stayed with her forever. She said, "So I was erased because I was proof they were never pure to begin with." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a conclusion she had already reached on her own. Margaret agreed to take a DNA test. So did her 2 children. The results came back 6 weeks later and confirmed what the blood type had already suggested. Margaret was a direct descendant of Rebecca and Barrett. And her genetic markers showed ancestry that the Barrett family had spent generations denying: Irish, possibly Italian, possibly something else they never wanted to acknowledge. The purity they had built their identity on was fiction, and the child they erased had carried the evidence in her veins the entire time. The story was published in a regional history journal in 1987. A few newspapers picked it up. Some readers were outraged. Others said it didn't matter anymore, that it was old history, that everyone involved was dead or too old to care. But Margaret's daughter, a woman named Claire, read the article and decided to do something no one expected. She contacted the remaining Barretts, the elderly brother and sister still living in Asheville, and she told them who she was. She told them she existed. She told them they couldn't erase her mother a second time. They never responded. But Claire didn't need them to, because the truth was already out. It was documented. It was real. And no amount of silence could make it disappear again. The Barrett family bloodline wasn't pure. It never had been. And the child they tried to erase had grown up, had children of her own, and lived a full life they were never supposed to know about. The lie died, but the truth and the people it tried to bury survived. And somewhere in North Carolina, in a records office that smells like old paper and dust, that birth certificate still exists. A reminder that some secrets don't stay hidden forever. And some bloodlines carry more than just DNA. They carry the weight of everything that was done to keep them.